Good morning, John Brennan. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Kate.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk first about the operation itself because I think a lot of people still have significant questions about what the US has done here. In your view, is what happened in Venezuela possible without inside help, without intelligence provided from inside the country?
And no, I think the short answer to your question is in order to undertake an operation like this, which is to go onto a foreign, in this case, Venezuelan military base, and seize the leader of a country who has a security detail around him all the time, you need to have a lot of advanced intelligence about what his movements are and how to take advantage of the environment there. And so clearly, this is something that was planned for many months and that the U.S. intelligence community was able to utilize its capabilities, both from a standpoint of human sources, intelligence collection capabilities in terms of signals intelligence, as well as other means of gathering this type of information. So this is what enabled the U.S. military to carry out what really was a very successful and impressive tactical operation.
I mean, some people have suggested that the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, may well have been involved herself, that she may well have provided information about the location of Maduro and his wife. How likely do you think that is?
Well, I don't think she would have done that wittingly. She could have done it unwittingly if there was some type of collection capability against her, either, again, with a human source who was well positioned or intercepted communications that she may have been involved in. So I just don't think that Dulce Rodriguez would have willingly provided that type of information to the United States.
But it's possible that she could have unwittingly done that.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose that the question arises because one of the biggest unknowns now is how well the US has planned for what happens next in Venezuela and how prepared Donald Trump is for being involved in Venezuela in the long haul. In your view, do you think significant work has been done in terms of what happens next now on the ground?
Well, I don't think so, based on what I've heard. When Donald Trump in his Mar-a-Lago press conference says that we, the United States, will run Venezuela, and then points to the people behind him, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, as the ones who are going to actually be running Venezuela, without any detail, and the fact that we don't have any presence on the ground there. I don't think that they have a good plan in place. And yes, there seems to be contacts with members of the current Venezuelan government, including seems to be the acting president Rodriguez. But I don't think there's a well thought through plan. Just because they had a very successful tactical operation does not mean that there's a good strategic way forward here.
How unusual is it that there hasn't been an immediate push for elections in Venezuela? Because I know that there is a slight difference of opinion among some senior figures in the US administration, but Donald Trump has been clear in the last 24 hours that immediate elections are not the priority. In fact, he's even questioned how Venezuelan citizens would be able to vote. How unusual a situation is that in your mind?
Well, I don't think it's unusual for the Trump administration because I don't think the Trump administration is dedicated to the advancement of democratic principles and rights around the world. I think what he is hoping to do is to be able to use the individuals who are still in place inside of Venezuela to do his bidding for him. So the fact that he so cavalierly dismissed the Nobel Prize winner Machado, as well as the person who won the election, which was Edmundo Gonzalez. I don't think he has any interest in actually putting the opposition, the legitimate opposition, and the ones who have, I think, the support of a lot of the Venezuelan people into place. I think he wants to work with a lot of the authoritarian and corrupt individuals who are currently in place in Venezuela.
To what end?
Well, clearly, I think there are several ends here. One, I do think there's a legitimate concern about the Venezuelans who have departed Venezuela, 8 million or so. Many of them have come into the United States. But I do think the more important reasons are going after Venezuela's oil wealth. It has the largest oil reserves in the world. And I think Donald Trump wants to be able to gain the wealth that still resides within Venezuelan territorial waters. But also, I think Marco Rubio has played a very pivotal role here in
Yeah.
terms of trying to cut off Venezuelan support to Cuba. Because Venezuela has kept the Cuban regime afloat by providing oil, providing other types of support. And so I do think this is a move to undermine the standing of the Cuban government, hoping that that's going to lead to the Cuban government's collapse. Because I do think Marco Rubio, who is the son of Cuban exiles, would really like to see the regime in Havana fall.
And that does seem to be the direction of travel. I mean, Donald Trump is saying that quiet part out loud, that he believes that Cuba will no longer be sustainable given what's happened in Venezuela. How likely do you think further US action is in terms of, well, maybe Cuba directly, but Colombia and even Greenland?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is a demonstration of the Trump administration's imperialist agenda. And I don't think it's going to stop at Venezuela. The question is, what is next? When is it going to happen? And he's already made some very public threats against Colombia, as you pointed out,
Mm.
Mexico and Cuba, Iran, and then Greenland, a NATO partner. It's just outrageous to think that we are threatening Denmark in terms of taking over Greenland. And Trump's senior White House officials are basically saying that we need to own it. The Danes shed blood for us in Afghanistan when we were going after Al Qaeda. They're very close partners, military, political, intelligence partners. And I just think it's outrageous that he's saying these things, as well as against Mexico, our neighbor. He's even talked about making Canada the 51st state. So I don't know which one of these initiatives he's going to pursue next, but I think we've only seen the beginning of what is going to be a very aggressive, dangerous, and very destabilizing Trump administration policy going after targets of opportunity that he has very publicly stated.
I mean, you clearly take Donald Trump's language around Greenland seriously. I wonder if you would urge European partners in the UK to do the same. But how at risk do you think the NATO alliance is at this moment in time?
I think it is at risk, and the Danish prime minister said publicly that we have to take Donald Trump's words very seriously. It's unfortunate that the United States is trying to flex its muscles this way. I do think it's a shameful exhibition of, again, American imperialism under the Trump administration. But I do think that it could lead the NATO alliance to really question what is the value of that alliance in light of this American go it alone attitude. That's why I wonder whether or not President Zelensky of Ukraine should take the security guarantees, if he gets them from the
Yeah.
United States, if he should take them seriously. Because Donald Trump is somebody who is very mercurial. He goes back on his word, and I don't think you can trust what he says. He's going to do what he wants, when he wants, and the way he wants. So we're in a very unprecedented time. And I do think these are very dangerous waters that we're in. And I think China and Russia are looking at how they can take advantage of the situation right now, and basically prying, I think, upon some of the different countries that I think are questioning the value of that U.S. relationship.
And do you think it's made the situation for Zelensky in Ukraine more precarious, given the signals that Russia will be taking from what Donald Trump is doing around NATO, as you mentioned, but also around the idea that, we are now in a world of spheres of influence, not as America as a sort of global policeman figure?
Absolutely. I don't think the United States under the Trump administration is a proponent, advocate, and defender of human rights and democratic principles worldwide. And what happened in Venezuela is basically the moral equivalent of what Vladimir Putin did in Ukraine. And I don't think we have the legitimacy now to actually complain about what Russia or maybe what even China might do when it comes to Taiwan. Any of these countries can use their military capabilities against weaker states, which is what the United States is doing now in Venezuela and is threatening to do against other countries as well. So, yeah, hemispheric spheres of influence. I think Donald Trump would like to make sure that we stay in charge of the Western Hemisphere, wants to dominate in places of Europe, also in the Middle East. I think he's going after where the wealth is, whether it be oil or monetary wealth.
Can I ask you finally, John Brennan, and it might sound like a strange question, but you are the former director of the CIA. watching this play out, as an American, how do you feel about what Donald Trump is doing to America, to the nation's reputation? How do you feel about it?
Well, talking to a lot of my fellow citizens and former colleagues, I think there's a sense of, quite frankly, shame that, again, the United States, that really has been, as you pointed out, sort of the world's protector, tried to safeguard human rights and values and democratic principles for the last 75 years. That's no longer the case. The national security strategy that the Trump administration put out late last year demonstrates that the Trump administration is interested in profiteering and financial gain, and America first, to the detriment of global stability and global peace and security. And so I do, I find this all very surreal. This is not the America that I've known. This is not the America and government that I worked for close to 35 years. And I do think we're just going through a very, very difficult time. And a lot of Americans are questioning and wondering what happened to this country and to our commitment to global peace and security, democratic principles and values. It's just so, so different than what our experience has been.
John Brennan, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kate.